Welcome to the Environment Planning Virtual Assignment. My name is Sharon Galashan, and today we are going to take a look at the full-day kindergarten model. Our first slide takes a look at the overview of our room. Now, each one of these centers supports the learning and development of every child in our program in a unique way. Our first learning area is the gross motor area. The gross motor area is a large space that supports large group gatherings for sharing lessons, read-alouds, designated physical activity or DPA, and that can include things like dancing, games, and group sharing opportunities. The gross motor area supports the development of this age group through social skills, learning how to be participants in cooperative games, self-regulating when things get very excited, and regulating themselves to settle back into a listening mode. It also gives our smaller people practice in coordination, balance, and their spatial skills in a large group. The gross motor area is inclusive for all children because, as you can see in the picture, it is barrier-free. So there is no steps up, there are no expectations of what is to be accomplished here. This is a place where children can have these large, expressive movements in any way they feel comfortable. It supports inquiry-based learning because it is open-ended. We can guide lessons, but then we can leave it up to children to interpret those lessons. So if we're having a lesson on birds, we can say, show me what a bird does, and all the children can show what they think a bird does. So it is very open-ended, and it also supports behavior because it has that ability to provide body breaks. When children are sitting for long periods of time, maybe they need to get up and move around, burn some energy. And it can also be the opposite of that, where they've experienced a lot of overstimulation in other parts of the room, and they need a wider, bigger space to get away from the clutter of everything that's going on. Our second area is the book browsing area. This is a kind of a cozy, comfortable spot where kids can settle into textbooks, like physical books, magazines, and ebooks. It's got pillows, it has lots of space to kind of stretch out, but also have access to all the material that they need. This can be a really adaptive area for all abilities because it includes both, like I said, the textbooks and digital copies. So if we have children who struggle with turning the pages or holding on to a book, having a digital copy of books with headphones is a great option for those kids to be able to just tap the screen and things like that. The program philosophy believes that providing age-appropriate exposure to learning materials sparks interest in new things. So we totally believe that children come to the program with previous knowledge, but we also want to introduce new knowledge that will spark interest and then continue to take paths that are unique to those children for them to explore it in their own way. The next is our Learning Center 3, Imaginative Play. Probably the most popular center I have seen anywhere I have ever worked, and it is a must-have in every early years room. The Imagination Play area provides a variety of unfixed materials. We have our staple table and chairs. If they have a couch, that's great. Sometimes you can find a little kitchenette. A mirror is also a great addition. And maybe if you have dress-up costumes, if that's permitted, that's a great thing to have there as well. Anything that's kind of neutral, that can be either a house or it can be a doctor's office or whatever they can think of. That's the great thing about Imaginative Play. Whatever ideas children bring to this center can just blossom and catch like wildfire with the other kids because they will have this understanding that, okay, this is what we're doing, and everybody just joins and plays along. Kindergarten is a really telling time for emergent literacy, and Imaginative Play supports those skills because we can have situations where there's an exchange in language between peers. So maybe some children are more expressive in their language, and that is demonstrated through Imaginative Play, and that's being shared with other peers who are going to pick up on that vocabulary and those words. Often symbolic play comes in imaginative play areas. So they're making grocery lists or writing a menu or adding signs. So it's so much more than just imaginative play. It ties in so many different elements, literacy being one of the biggest ones. Imaginative play areas support behaviors as it calls on children to play cooperatively. And that's a skill that's still developing in the early kindergarten age, where maybe they're the oldest child or the only child. So collaborating on an idea, collaborating on a scenario on the fly with other children is building this adaptability, this willingness to negotiate, this cooperation, and all these things, these social skills that are being worked on through this kind of play that are going to benefit the children certainly later on when it comes to problem solving in the schoolyard or at the lunch table. Imaginative play centers are an excellent spot where we can see relationships being built between families and children. And that's because I think that one of the most popular scenarios that occur in an imaginative play station is house. So children are bringing their own experiences, their own family dynamics, their own ecological systems to the play. And this is where some relationships can really be built, because now children are getting a better understanding, a deeper understanding of who their friends are and where they come from as it's represented in a playhouse scenario. Another favorite is the block center. What tried and true center that is a favorite of many, and I think the reason again for this is because it is so open-ended. Anything can be created, anything can be challenged, and in block centers I always like to add supportive materials like animals or people or cars. So for example, if they're building highways and bridges, they can grab some cars to drive on them. If they're building a house, they've got people to put in them, and just extend those ideas, extend that play. The block centers are really great in supporting cognitive development because it really gets children thinking mathematically and using their problem solving skills in terms of how do we make this taller, how do we balance this, how do we stretch it to the other side. Block centers are inclusive for all children because, again, there is no expectation of outcome. There is no must-dos. There's no real rules to follow outside of safety. And therefore, any child of any ability can come and create. Block centers have the potential to support positive behavior. This is a little different from all the other ones. I find, anyway, in my own experience, that while block centers do have the potential to support that positive behavior, they can, however, draw out some negative behaviors because blocks are such a big activity. Typically, you can only have a few children there. So even if you give it a large space, you don't want too many children there because for safety, somebody's just going to get hit in the head. They're very hard objects to play with. And because of the limited amount of children that can play there, it tends to present some behavioral challenges, fighting over whose turn it is to be there, and so on and so forth. Learning center number 5 is our creative arts center. Now this space would include your traditional materials like paper and scissors and pencils and crayons and glue and scissors, old magazines, things like that. But it can also include some more non-traditional things like sewing spools, paper towel rolls, beads, just anything really you can find that children can create something out of. Learning centers like this use a multitude of literacies to create and explore ideas. Just like the book browsing area, this is a great center for children to come and self-regulate. In many experiences I've had so far, just from September to now, I see children who are in an open room of free play. They become very overstimulated. And we've guided them to some coloring or some creative arts where they can just sit down and focus on what's in front of them. And it's really helped control some of those outbursts or those negative behaviors where they wouldn't know what to do otherwise. So creative arts centers really supports that mental well-being, the self-regulation element for children to have somewhere quiet to go where they can just settle into something and feel safe and feel secure. It also supports fine motor development in younger kindergarten children. So learning how to cut, learning how to hold that pencil properly, just developing that strength in their hands so that when they are moving on to writing and cutting, things like that, they have the strength and the coordination to do that well. Self-expression is a key element to well-being in the early years, and being a child feeling represented in a room is very important, and that's another thing that a creative arts center provides, is an outlet for children to say, this is how I think I look, this is my family, this is what I think it looks like outside. And having that ability to express themselves, especially if they're children who don't know how to do that verbally or don't do it well, having a creative art outlet to express themselves and be heard is a great option. Creative arts can also support relationship building in terms of, again, peers sharing skills with other peers, bringing in things like old magazines and brochures where children can find relatable images to their families, to their cultures, and their communities, and use those in their creative arts. And that really builds bridges between school and family. So the Creative Arts Station is a great spot to involve families and say, hey, we could use some old magazines, we could use some old travel brochures, things like that, that may have images that represent their culture, their family, and their community. Finally, our last learning center is the Loose Parts and Sensory Play Center. And this is a really dynamic center because there is truly no limitations to this. Loose parts can be pieces of wood cutouts, they could be buttons, they could be Lego. So really gives no predetermined thought, predetermined ideas to what children can do with them. This center also includes to the left a light table, and light tables are really exciting too, so that children can take loose parts or they can take things that they find outside and bring them to the light table and have a closer look at them. So we would include magnifying glasses. You can also provide just 3D transparent shapes that you can put on top of the light tables for them to create images and structures out of. The loose parts and sensory play area is still really important for kindergarten age groups. It's a great partner in math literacy in terms of being able to do lots of counting and representation of numbers, so like rote counting, things like that. There's so many options children can use that might entice them into that mathematical thinking. It also gives practice to some of those fine motor skills that we talked about in the last station, where we're strengthening the grip, we're strengthening coordination. So adding pieces like Lego, connector blocks, beads, things like that are a great addition to a loose parts play. The loose parts and sensory play area is definitely a great spot for observation, because it's here where we're going to really see children's imaginations be stretched, where we're going to see inquiry really come out, asking questions about the way things look, about the way things feel, about the way things react in their environment. And this is really important as educators, so that we can see skills that need to be developed and find creative ways to support that. Because nothing is fixed in this center, the inclusivity and inquiry-based approach allows for an ever-changing experience for children, driven by their individual influences and interests that emerge during their time in the program. And that goes for the room in its entirety. It's got to be a living space where nothing is fixed, that ultimately the approach for the room is to foster well-being, expression, engagement, and belonging through a space that is living and changing alongside the changing development of the children that are in it.